everyone! Hello, and welcome back to Space Engineers on the Xbox, on the Series X, and today I want to talk about hydrogen and large grid. You may notice that I'm on my creative save and I'm on my shipbuilding gantry, and here's our small grid hydrogen ship, and here's our large grid. So I want to talk about some of the things before I get involved in potentially building a larger ship. I want to discuss hydrogen and piping things in. And what we're going to do here actually is we're going to quickly change the time of day. Early morning. Okay. So, when you're thinking about hydrogen ships, one, if you're building in an Earth-like planet, you're probably wise to have a think about how heavy the ship's going to be, how many thrusters that you want on it, and so on. Now, if you're using modded thrusters, obviously, like the quad flame fronts, then you're going to require less thrusters because those things put out an immense amount of power. But if you're building using vanilla thrusters, then that's a different matter. If you hear any strange crashes and bangs in the background, Jasper, the kitten, is enjoying his newfound freedom around the house, and I will post a couple of pictures of him in the community group so you can see. He's almost the spitting image of the big lad that passed away. So anyway, this is my cockpit. And this is the start of a large grid. Now, what I wanted to do here with this is just use that cockpit. You could, if you wanted, build an actual control panel with a bridge, but we'll cross that bridge literally when we come to it, because I have a couple of ideas of things I want to do. What I wanted to do here is talk about hydrogen and how hydrogen is a sort of tricky thing for a lot of people to get their heads around. Because you're going to need, on a large grid, hydrogen tanks. And if you look at these things, right? One, you're going to need oxygen tanks to store any oxygen if you're going to even consider going into space. And then you're going to need hydrogen. Now, you could have a small hydrogen tank, but if you're building a larger grid ship, you're looking at these hydrogen tanks. So, if you have one hydrogen tank, my suggestion is to have two oxygen generators to feed that tank if it's a large hydrogen tank. The idea is you're trying to get more hydrogen into the system almost than you're using. But remember that that is going to literally limit you in terms of the weight. These things are heavy. So what you want to do is you want to think where you're going to store your fuel. Now, I could make a larger ship, but what I want to do is I kind of want to make just a demo large grid ship similar to this thing, and always follow the rule of function first and foremost over form. So here we have a cockpit. Do I want this ship to go into space? If I say yes, then I definitely need at least one oxygen tank somewhere on this. And what ships are, in essence, when you look at building them, I'm going to just use light armor blocks. Ships, right, are boxes. Every ship is, in essence, a box. And a large grid ship is basically a series of large boxes, potentially with crew quarters, living quarters, or whatever you want to call it. Some way of sort of making the ship airtight. And so on. But large grid blocks, if you look at your engineer, have a roof height of about this. So if you're not worried about having a cavernous roof, you can literally decide, okay, well, I want my roof for this thing to be here. But how do we get oxygen into the cockpit and seal the ship at the same time? That's going to be tricky. So if we're going to use this cockpit, we need to think about how we're going to feed that. And that's going to change our design. Because now, well, we dive into this thing, right? This is our view there and view there. If we put any blocks either side of this cockpit, we are going to limit the view, but we will seal this thing in. So if we do this, and then we're thinking, right, we've got to put oxygen in this. We can use a conveyor junction. They are airtight. If we try to use a conveyor tube, that won't be airtight. But if we throw in a conveyor junction here, that will be airtight. And this is, in essence, not going to be a pretty ship at all. As I said, to think about ships, you have to think about them in terms of boxes in boxes. Do we want a single roof on this? Or do we want to go up any further? Well, if we go up further, if you look, starting to create an interior space. Do we want this interior space? And this is what you always have to think about when you're designing ships, where everything is going to go. Because on this, we could extend this wall here and this floor. The more blocks you add, the more weight. So let's look at that maybe as our limit for how wide we want this thing to be. I say this is going to be in several parts because I want to break this one up so you're not watching massive videos each time. Now I'm thinking, just for a bit of a change, I want to make a bit of a weird interior design. And one of my suggestions, if you're going to build a big ship and you're playing in creative mode, you can, if you so desire, like I did with the Callisto 71, build the whole thing in space. If you're playing, obviously, in survival, then you're going to have to build all of this and weld it up. So My advice in that regard is to sketch it down on graph paper, or at least get a good idea of what you want to begin with. Because mistakes cannot easily be rectified in terms of the ship design when you're playing in survival. I pause, by the way, it's because I have cats and they are very interested. They're very interested in the cursor on the screen, especially the kitten. We're just going to not bother with a sort of standard airlock on this, I don't think. You can build closed oxygen systems. I do recommend building a closed oxygen system into a ship, but honestly, that, you can do that. I'm just going to extend this wall here. Give you a rough idea of boxes inside boxes. Extend this wall. Pop there. Pop there. What we're looking at, honestly, is, as I said, boxes and boxes interconnected. And the idea is you can mess about with it to your heart's content. You're still going to have some vision there, but you're going to have blocked vision here. So you're probably going to want to fly the ship in third person. But then again, this is more like a sort of heavy freighter design more than anything. And what we want to look at is how we're going to approach this in terms of where everything goes. This is what I wanted to talk about. But I needed, obviously, a base to work from. Everybody starts out somewhere in this game as well. Don't be frightened of messing about. Use creative mode for messing about, because it will save you time in the long run. The idea is have fun with it. It's like any 3D drawing program or a thing like that. This is a great way of just messing about and learning the ropes. So I'm looking at a way to store fuel, potentially turning the fuel storage and power and so on into a let's see, let me find my things so I can, part and parcel of the actual engine system on this. So I could pop two of these either side, and then what I'd be able to do there is I can link thrusters off them. So if I extend this back here, bear with me as I think this through. It's a living design. I want access to virtually every single port on this. And I'm going to need to put it somewhere. I think the best way of doing this is to give it just a bit of a thing to sit on. And then I can actually cut through. Once it's connected up, I should be able to cut through. Let's see. Let's save just in case this goes wrong. The idea is to connect up this tank to the grid, and almost like weld it in place. That's very similar to spot welding, because what we want to do is we want to try and cut through here. Those were just marker blocks, so we don't worry about them. Now you can see what I can do here is I can use these ports here to provide thrusters on the outside, but I could also run a bunch of piping, because this is just the skeleton. This isn't the exterior. Like I said, you have to think about ships in terms of boxes within boxes. If you've ever seen my Century Eagle build or the Callisto 71, then you'll know what I mean. Let's see, we want this to be a little more stable here. Because now we're going to have to think about, well, what we're doing with this back part here. Want to extend it out some more, because you're also thinking about power. Remember, if you're in survival, you can play around with whatever you've got access to. You're probably going to be on hydrogen engines, maybe, and battery power. If you're sitting next to a massive lake of ice, then you're going to be well and truly happy in that regard. Here, I'm looking potentially at a few things. One, I don't want an oxygen system on this ship to feed into the fuel system. I want to use two separate systems in that regard. So I'm going to look at oxygen, and I'm thinking, honestly, wrong category, as always. I'm thinking that our generator, we only need one if we're generating oxygen into the ship, could, in theory, go maybe there. And we want it to feed into the cockpit. So, starting to think about this now in terms of the piping. We're just going to use the regular ones. We won't bother with the Heavy Industry DLC ones, because you may not own the Heavy Industry DLC. That will feed oxygen down into the cockpit. Oxygen high, temperature warm. And if we just leave that as it is, we could put a storage box, let's say, if we're just going to be simple in terms of a building. We could put a small cargo container on the roof as well, like this, for storing ice and ice alone. Now, there's a problem, but that's not a problem until you think it's a problem. What we want is we want not only that particular cockpit, we want this room oxygenated as well. And if anyone has ever played with Space Engineers venting, one thing that I really wish they introduced as standard are the conveyor blocks and slopes from the mod. But I mean, that's not too bad. So if we chop this pipe. We could use conveyor junction. If we are using the Heavy Industry DLC piping, though, just find it and show you, you'll notice that the Heavy Industry piping has a few different designs to it. You might decide the aesthetics please you more, or you might just want to use this particular cross junction. But as I said, we're going to stick with good old-fashioned conveyor junction. And then above us, if we just slap on an air vent. So let's make it face that way in this area. Then when we oxygenate this properly for the next part of the video as well, as I said, I'm not going to let these run too long. We'll be able to do this as well. So let's get this conveyor tube here, and let's put our junction and our air vent here for now. And that's sort of where I'm thinking to go for the design of these things. You can create a very quick and dirty airlock in this game by simply using the sliding doors. Let's find them. Throw one like that, and then you come around here like this. Spin it again like that. You'll create a two-stage simple airlock. And we're going to go the same here. And if you watch my tutorial on the timer lock doors, you could set all the doors on the ship to auto close. Now we should be able to enter the cockpit here, exit the cockpit there, and come through here. So now we're starting to look pretty good. We have no power. Obviously we are gaining power from the grid itself, since this gantry is built into the main grid off a rotor and is supplying power to anything that's connected to it. But you can start to see that this is shaking up and it's taking shape a bit. So we've got two of these tanks here. We want to think about where we're going to store a bunch of cargo. I mean, this is a pretty damn big box, but we could do this with it. This large cargo container here. We'll have to build around it when we build out the shell of the ship, but this will allow us to store a good quantity of various ice and fuel, because what I'm thinking of is building back past this anyway, once I've got the piping in. I'm thinking reactors for this one. Probably a couple of large reactors should do it. We'll see. Obviously, if you're using mods, you can just use Flare's tiered reactors and stick one great big one on that generates enormous amounts of power, enough to be able to shuffle a Star Destroyer through space. But before I end this one, we're just going to look at our... let's go to gas and logistics. Generation in terms of O2 and hydrogen. My idea is that I'm going to link up two of these getting Star Trek themes in my head almost. Packaging. So that's 2 of these per hydrogen tank. I've got 2 hydrogen tanks, so that should give me a good chunk of fuel. And to pipe it into here, I'm tempted to just drop in my friend, the conveyor junction, either side. You can build this in symmetry mode if you want, but it's always wise to build. Oops. I'm seeing the line there. Always wise. There we go. To build without symmetry mode, so you get an idea of how things work. So that is supplying fuel to the hydrogen tanks. Now, obviously, we want ice to come in off here, so we're going to need probably to look at where we're going to do that from. My suggestion, pop it there. Pop a conveyor block in. Pop one of these. Like this. Link that. Link that. And so now, if we put ice in there, then our 2 O2 generators either side will draw the ice in from central storage, and it also leaves us enough room to play around with reactors. If we're feeling brave, we could slap a few reactors. We could put one there, or we could put one there. This leaves the back part here potentially to add another few tubes. A conveyor sorter isn't needed for this particular thing because ice and uranium will get pulled into a ship without the need for a conveyor sorter, as long as you've got the whole darn thing connected up properly. So now, what we're looking at here then is potential ways to get hydrogen into our system on here, and we've got it because it's coming down through the conveyor blocks. That's why we're looking at that. And if you want to see the hydrogen tanks, you'll notice you can't see anything until you go to the control panel, and you'll see they're filling. Look, hydrogen tank 1, hydrogen tank 2. Now in creative, they start at 50% now, and then they fill up slowly. That was a change. So we're looking good on this one. You're starting to see the shape, the skeleton of a large grid ship. And now, that's really all I've got time for on this one. As I said, I don't want to take it too much above half an hour. For some people, that might be a bit too long. But hopefully you picked up some interesting hints and tips, and you can start to see how to approach the hydrogen design of a ship simply. What we're going to do here as well is we are going to slap some conveyor blocks on this system, because I want to build out some piping which I could run in as part of the walls, but then I'd need to potentially cover it from within. That I will talk about though in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for the support, and look forward to any announcements from Keen Software in the near future regarding the next step in the warfare updates. It is the year of war, and we've had Warfare 1, Field Engineer, and we've had Heavy Industry as a preparation for Warfare 2 and potentially Warfare 3. My prediction on 2 is that I think it's going to focus potentially on the base side of the game. Headquarters need defence as well, so we'll see. Warfare 3, I think, would be a good one for basically a major overhaul to combat and ships. As I said, though, that's it. I'll catch you in the next one. Ta-ta, and bye for now.